So I'm really pleased to host this panel. This has been a journey, a love of sorts. The journey was kind of as follows. So I lead LITE Lab. In the LITE Lab, we actually, I presented what we do, which is to focus on legal innovation and amongst lawyers. And one of the co-panelists at one of the functions I was speaking at was an organization called the Chancery Lane Project. So Chancery Lane Project is very well known. It's UK based, and what they do is they create climate clauses. And they reached out to me and said, Brian, would you be interested in helping to lead this initiative in Hong Kong and China? At that time, I said I was kind of busy, so maybe I'll come back to you. This is in 2022. So in 2023, I said, okay, right, maybe I might be able to do it. But I said, China is a bit too difficult. China, as you know, is a very different legal system, but I said I can do Hong Kong and I can do Singapore. So on the back of that, to date now, 1 year, nearly 1 year since then, we now have 4 working groups. One on green loans, one on green capital markets, one on green investment funds, and one on green building construction. Why I think it's so cool is because my background is I'm a capital markets lawyer. I used to be at one of the investment banks here doing ECM, DCM, M&A, so I know that product. But as a lawyer, lawyers do so many things. Lawyer covers so many areas, and I love the concept that has been coined not just by the American Bar Association, but also the Law Society of the UK, which is climate conscious lawyering. Because often lawyers go, yeah, but I'm just a lawyer, what can I do? But actually, there's so a lot that can be done, and it's so pleasing to be able to bring together and meet with, sometimes for the very first time, different parts of the ecosystem, different lawyers bringing different skill sets together. So maybe if we can go around the physical and virtual room so that everyone can briefly introduce themselves and your practice. Starting with you, Vivian. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Brian, and thank you for organizing this and inviting me to speak. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not good at tech, but I learned a lot today at the earlier session. So my background is maybe similar in that it's capital markets, and I sort of see myself as a corporate commercial lawyer. We've experience on specifically finance and investments management, and I've been doing that for 20 over years. But in the past 10 years, actually, I've been looking at the emergence of different ESG issues and contributing to standard setting. So I guess my current role is at Denton, so I lead asset management and the ESG practice, and also globally the sustainable finance working group. A lot of what I do is actually internal engagement to get lawyers more involved in thinking about relevance of ESG to their practice. A lot of it is new. So I'm really glad to be part of the efforts that we're talking about today to look at contractual clauses. I know about TCLP when they started to work on that, but I think that was very much focused on efforts in London, so it actually takes a bit of time, I guess, for momentum to build. I would say that we are actually at a very good juncture to take more concrete action and go more deeply, and I think the earlier sessions actually cover a lot of that. So we'll be talking more about what we're doing within the working group, but I will say that, yeah, I covered now the supply side on financing, transition, financing and taking ESG into account, and also advise more and more on the demand side issue and considering different E and S and G factors. So everything I shared just now is actually very relevant and very concrete, and so I think it's really great, if I may add, that we have actually this kind of platforms available. So I'll stop there for my intro and pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. So I actually met Vivian beforehand, but the great thing about this platform also is I get to meet new and different lawyers. And in fact, Zita, is this the first time we're meeting face-to-face? I think so, right? So even though we've worked for 6-8 months, right, we've never actually met face-to-face. We've all been doing virtual. So please introduce yourself, Zita. Thank you.
Yes, that also explains how ESG we are all doing all the virtual meetings. So I'm Sita from Pinsent Masons. Actually, I am not a finance lawyer. I'm more a construction lawyer doing construction commercial deals and projects. And why am I here is because all the finance experts here, they're very into, and I think the green financing is one of the first and foremost industry that is going green, and they approach us. They want to transform the Chancery Lane Project into and bring it to Hong Kong. And there is actually substantial part of the clauses that are relates to construction and property. Therefore, they approach us and want us to have a look and see if we are interested. And me personally, I like environmental issues, and I'm very concerned with it as well. That's why personally I have an interest in there. And also actually in the whole Hong Kong market, all the efforts are very dispersed. Most of the government effort is not mostly in finance or EV, but not much in the construction industry. Whereas actually construction industry is the second biggest contributor to carbon emission in Hong Kong. So why not I contribute a bit and see what we can do there. And actually, because I am working on construction, there are a lot of renewable energy around Southeast Asia. A lot of countries are working on that, which I'm also involved in, and all different Hong Kong projects that are waste to energy projects in Hong Kong. So this is something that I'm interested in actually doing every day, so I hope I can contribute more in this aspect. Thanks.
Great, and we're really pleased to have you here because we are Hong Kong after all, so building and construction, right, and building, and as you rightly pointed out, it is a major contributor. So really pleased to have you as part of the initiative, and you've been a great contributor there. And the platform has allowed me to meet with other lawyers, including Naomi. So I have met Naomi once before face-to-face, accidentally at an event, right? But Naomi, please do introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I'm sorry I can't be there personally tonight, but I think you're probably not sorry to have me so far away. As my background is that I am a finance lawyer at DLA Piper, and I specialize in financing of trade and energy. And the reason why I joined that was I was on exchange in Japan when the Fukushima nuclear incident happened. And it had a very deep impact on me and the friends that I was making. And at that time, to hear so much about the issues and questions about energy security, where our source of energy would come from, had a very deep impact on me. So that when I joined the legal world in Hong Kong, and I found a firm that was doing energy financing, infrastructure financing, I thought that's exactly the team that I want to join. And we went on to do LNG financing, which was going to replace the nuclear reliance that Japan had. And now, further on to the future, we can see the next step. It's transitioning away from even fossil fuels like LNG, and the next step of going into solar, wind, and even pushing further boundaries into hydrogen. And so that's the story and journey of how I started in the kind of work that I'm doing, and also the story of why I'm here talking about ESG as well.
Thanks so much, Naomi. So when I first met Naomi, you know, she's a project finance lawyer, and that was my first love. I did project finance way back when I went to New York, and I joined the firm that I chose allowed me to do project financing in Latin America. So I was doing LATAM project finance, but also traditional capital markets in the mainland as well, as in the States. So maybe if I can go around, and you've all touched upon this a little bit already, but so how is it that you first heard about the initiative, and then what drew you to it? Because what you hear so when Chancery Lane set up, it's primarily lawyers contributing time towards this, but it's all pro bono. None of these really highly paid lawyers are they're charging anything for all the time and effort they're actually spending on this, right? So they're doing it aligned both from a business point of view, but also from a personal point of view, as you will hear. So maybe we'll start with you again, Vivian. Thank you.
Yeah, actually have been, thank you, I have to remember to do that and then start troubling you. Yeah, I guess, so I mentioned that I actually have been looking at ESG issues for the past 10 years. So it's earlier, from the earlier days, so it wasn't driven by client demand. So it's what I believe in terms of more purpose-driven, what am I doing with my skills and how is it serving the world? So I was very curious about doing that. I have to thank Hong Kong U for that, although it's not a law school. I'm not from Hong Kong originally, but I've been here 20 years, but I came here for the journalism master's degree and really opened my eyes and that kind of a career break to take stock of where I am in my journey and what I'm doing in my life. And so that's where I started. And so I actually know about this project because I know Brian through the Impact Lawyers, so I think we are probably one of the earlier ones. We can't really know which one is earlier to know about this organization of Impact Lawyers around the world, I guess, to put it simply. And so a plug there because GALE is the name of the organization. The Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers is also a supporting organization, and we're both, Brian and I are both on the regional board. So I guess how did I know about this project? I knew about TCLP, but I didn't see, that relevance. Or not, I guess I wasn't paying attention in terms of bring it to Asia, but they approached Brian, and Brian mentioned that. I said, well, this is great. And so, of course, I was happy to support and contribute where I can. And so that's what I've been doing the past year, along with Brian. And I actually, as Brian mentioned, there are 4 working groups. And I'm the one who say, I want to join all 4. But I guess I contribute where I can because I have been looking at this for some time. And so though I'm not, like, for example, in the green construction, and there's a lot of very specific kind of real estate or construction issues that I'm not that familiar with, but, I have worked on real estate funds. I understand sort of how investment managers across asset classes think about ESG. So I guess from a finance and investors' perspectives, I try and contribute where I can. But I guess what I'm looking at across is really sort of how lawyers can develop these tools that help the market. I think the earlier sessions, actually, I know we sort of reordered, but to me it's perfect because we heard a lot about reporting and disclosure requirements. We heard about emerging regulations and the need to transition. And so there's a lot of data. So there's an emphasis in the earlier session on having data and having data to measure and manage. Well, actually, I think law has the effect to, I guess, drive the market in terms of what do we need to measure and manage. And also, when we have the data, when we say manage, what do we mean by manage, right? How do we manage? Within the organization, policy, procedures, contract clauses, how do we manage suppliers? All of this, I'm just summarizing, but all of this actually involves contracts and law, the use of law from a regulatory and legal perspectives. And so I hope I'm articulating how meaningful this is, but we are taking it in steps because the market is, I guess, looking for direction, but at the same time, we sort of have to be looking at building consensus and building understanding of what we need to do here. So if I can say, do you want me to cover a little bit? Because we have the capital markets working group. We also have the loans working group.
We'll cover that shortly. Okay. No, thank you. Thanks, Vivian. So I think, again, so I knew Pins and Mason in different practices, but actually didn't know the construction practice. And then afterwards, I've heard how strong and wonderful the practice is. So how were we connected? I actually forgot.
I think how we connected was through an in-house contact from HSBC. Right. And it was my partner, Hinson Zhang, one of our partners, contact. And then referring to me because he does dispute, and I'm more on the commercial side. And contract clauses, drafting is what I do most of the time. That's why he was like, oh, Sita, are you free and do you want to join? Because internally within Pins and Masons, we have a lot of sustainability and climate related initiatives internally as well. And I was those who were running and doing all the first steps in the office. So, that's why Hinson would think, oh, maybe Sita would be interested. And I'm like, yeah, why not? And actually talking to different clients, well, actually, originally I was like, but not a lot of our clients were doing anything on climate, and it must be expensive to source different construction materials, less carbon, closer to Hong Kong, that must be very expensive. Then we were talking with some clients, and they were doing a whole construction project. It's like, oh yeah, we are trying to aim for carbon neutral. And I'm like, what, really? And that whole conversation blows up, and telling me how amazing they are, what is the plans, and actually they said, it's not that expensive. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I'm like, that intrigues me even more. So that's something that everyone should be doing if that's not additional cost. So that's how I get intrigued and really want to do more and explore more in the industry, and get more developers involved or main contractors to focus more on this aspect. Yeah.
Great. No, thanks. I hadn't heard that story, and I think it's a great one because, so as you may hear, you know, Vivian and I kind of more on the true believer side, right? So we used to do this way back when at Credit Suisse when I was there. My day job was to cover traditional IPOs, ECM, DCM, right? But on the side, I was also the co-chair for the charity committee, and I actually helped direct the philanthropy money into impact investing, right? And then also I was working on microfinance and clean tech kind of initiatives there as well. So some of us are like true believers from way back when, but your story was great because it shows the client interest, right? So we're now at a confluence where it's not just the regulatory push-pull, and you heard about carrots and sticks earlier on, right? But actually there's genuine client interest for lots of different reasons as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Naomi, what about you? So what brought you shared a little bit about your, and again, I hadn't heard the Japan story before. So how did you first hear about it? I think our firms were connected via Chancery Lane, is that right?
Yes, and I came to TCLP through DLA Piper in the UK. The DLA Piper in the UK is one of the first group of members amongst other law firms and other banks and corporates who joined the TCLP initiative. And they reached out to me to join the Hong Kong section. And I'm really pleased that through TCLP, I've managed to meet you, Brian, and get to know the LITE Lab. And I think that what you've done and what LITE Lab has done is created a really fantastic ecosystem for lawyers, not just within TCLP, but for us to connect to each other, to talk about different ESG matters, updates as well when we see them in the market, and events. Because I think it is very different when you have a lawyer drafting ESG compared to what I think you're trying to promote, which is being a climate conscious lawyer and creating that ecosystem for all of us to be climate conscious lawyers and have that discussion together. So I'm very happy that TCLP gave us that introduction.
Great, thanks so much, Naomi. So again, as you've heard, actually, the representatives here are from global firms, but if you're following the emergence of ESG and climate, Europe is by far and away the most advanced. Then comes the US, but it's more controversial there, and certain terms are more antagonistic. And then comes Asia, where the awareness level is actually not very high. So that's why, for us, the importance of kind of building a community, raising awareness, and for me, being part of the Green Week here in Hong Kong so that we can actually kind of raise awareness across the board. So one of the things that I did was whenever we have working groups, I would take a step back. Before we set up a working group, I said somebody has to put up their hand to be the coordinator. Because again, all of us are doing this voluntary. We all have day jobs and like, right? So these are some of the fantastic coordinators we have that actually have put up their hands. So maybe if you can briefly speak about the working groups that you chair, and give an overview of the work that you're doing, the kind of participants and the plans that you have. We'll change order this time. So we'll start with you, Naomi. So Naomi leads the Green Loans working group, which is actually very active. Naomi is very diligent in starting, let me take a step back. Chancery Lane has nearly 200 precedents under English and Welsh law, and originally their idea was to do a transposition. So can you please transpose this into Hong Kong law and or Singapore law? For me, it sounded a touch colonial. So I said, no, we're not doing a transposition. We're actually going to use this as a basis. They've got fantastic precedents, but have the practices emerged and evolved? Who can we use this to build the stakeholders, and how can we use this to grow further? And so maybe let's start with you, Naomi. So Naomi leads the Green Loan Initiative and is doing a fantastic job there. Naomi.
Thanks, Brian. So yes, I'm part of the Green Loans group. I'm one of the coordinators, and Vivian is also part of the group as well. So I'll get your views as well, Vivian, as we go along. But the basis of what we're doing is we're looking at this clause drafted by TCLP UK, and it's called the Casper's Clause. And the background to that is that the lawyer who drafted the clause has the right to name the clause, and they name the clauses after their children, because it's a reminder that all the green contracting that we're doing and all this work is for the next generation. And Casper's Clause sets out a sustainability lending clause, which you can insert into a loan agreement. And the broad mechanics of this loan is that it sets out sustainability targets the borrower to meet. And when these are met, there are certain consequences under the loan agreement. One example is that a borrower could have a strategy to reach net zero by 2040 or 2050, and they have a plan of how they will reach that milestone year by year. And if they reach those milestones, there could be benefits to the borrower under a loan agreement, and that's the Casper Clause mechanics. So we're taking this clause that was drafted in the UK and putting it into an Asian context for Asian borrowers and banks. And who is involved in this Green Clause discussion in Asia? At the beginning of our journey a year ago, we started off with 2 law firms. And really, thanks to Brian, his reaching out, inviting people, creating an ecosystem. In 1 year, we have grown to 8 corporate members. Half of them are private law firms. We have 2 banks involved and 2 large Hong Kong corporates. We have members from Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia as well. And if you want to join us, we can make that 9 or 10 corporate members. It would be great to have more people. And the approach that we've been using, really spearheaded by Brian, is something called design thinking. So we don't jump in and start drafting. We put aside our natural instinct to be lawyers, and we first think about who our users are and what they want. And so for the users of the Casper's Clause, these are borrowers and lenders. So when we get together as a group, we're not just discussing legal drafting, but we also have a very deep discussion on the topic itself and how it impacts our users. We would obviously invite any other lawyers or corporates to join us. And I thought while I also tell you about the background of the Green Lending Group, I thought I'd also share with you some of the challenges that we faced in the year and really our aspirations for this group. My fellow coordinator for this group, Karen, has a great expression, and she says that corporates are all at different stages in their sustainability journey. And trying to draft one sustainability clause that takes into account different industries, different jurisdictions, different corporates in their stages of sustainability, different banks and their in-house requirements, and even regulation as well, actually is a very big challenge. And we spent a lot of time discussing so many aspects of this, that actually what has emerged is that we're not just going to draft a clause for sustainability linked to lending. We're also going to put together a playbook, which teases out a lot of the discussion that we've been having and considerations for borrowers and lenders to think about when they're looking at this Casper Clause. It also has a very good effect of helping educate and promote understanding of sustainability targets and the Casper's Clause in Asia. And the aspiration I would love to see as part of this work that every corporate in Asia has a meaningful and ambitious sustainability linked loan. And if all lawyers were climate conscious, and if this could be one of our goals or one of the products of what we're doing, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Doesn't Naomi paint a great picture, right? So we want to mainstream this. This is the whole point, right? And and for the financial institutions, this is a win-win-win, right? For the issuers who get better pricing, for the financial institutions with new products, and that's kind of our humble ambition. So you phrased it really well there, Naomi. And I have some students in the room, so I think they may be glad to hear that I'm actually, practicing what I preach in terms of design thinking, right? So it actually, we're applying it, and so you guys, you're learning stuff that practitioners did not learn at law school.
You're very lucky.
Thanks. Zita, over to you. Now, what you'll hear is every committee and working group is run differently because of the different dynamics, different players, and the like. So Zita, maybe you can shed a bit of light in relation to how your committee and working group is evolving. Thanks.
For the green building and construction team, I think, well, as I have mentioned, all the effort in this industry for green construction is quite scattered by different main contractors or different developers. So what we are focusing on with my partner, Lucas Lim, who is now based in Singapore. So we are trying to coordinate different people, getting people, stakeholders to join into the group, and we listen more and more and more. I think that's one of the main purpose for the past half a year, to understand what is the standard, what are people doing, because as lawyers, we always follow the precedent, what are the instructions from the clients. When there are none, or they're limited, then we don't know what to do or what the market is actually doing. So what we have been doing is trying to pull different stakeholders in to share knowledge, give us ideas of what they have been pursuing, how they find materials around the world or around their country to make it more less carbon footprint, or what other methods they are trying to reduce carbon emission. And this is the key thing that we are doing. And throughout the course, we have been connected with the Construction Industry Council in Hong Kong, and who has been actually advocating a lot on sustainable construction. They have different schemes, awards, or certification for building structures that are qualified as sustainable buildings, and different tiers and requirements. So contractors or developers know what are the requirements, so they can do accordingly. And we have also connected with Reset, an initiative that is actually helping contractors or developers to kind of develop our playbook in procuring materials, because somehow when you don't know how much carbon emission is one material, it's hard for you to calculate or do all the auditing that previously the panel was mentioning. So they are very helpful to try to help different parties to understand the whole structure of their project and how to procure materials better. They call it the buyers initiative, but then Brian is like a bit skeptical of the name, but it's all about procuring materials for construction, which is a big contributor to all the carbon emission. So Reset and CIC are two very key contributors in our team that has been sharing a lot of knowledge. We also have the MTR representative. We also have in-house counsels from developers and also main contractors who are a key advocate for green construction. They have been taking their own initiative in doing green construction, because actually Hong Kong government does not mandate anything. So they are the ones who are on the forefront on the ground doing the procurement. So those are the people we need in the team to understand what is going on out there. And then we are the lawyers, then we can put things to paper. That's how our team is structured or progressing so far. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Zita. And so the same way that Naomi was saying, through my contacts, I could pull people in finance into the initiative, that's where Zita has been doing a great job, because I don't know anybody in construction. So she's the one outreaching and actually pulling those stakeholders in, so, which has been wonderful. And actually from the great success we have here in Hong Kong, we're then working with our Singapore colleagues to deal with the comparable organizations in Singapore, so that because it may be the case that the clauses we draft are quite Hong Kong specific because of the initiatives here and the incentives, but maybe it'll be common and there may be differences because of what the Singaporean initiatives and the like as well. And actually we've had great responses as was mentioned by Naomi. So I've had a major, a GC of a major bank out of Malaysia come and outreach to us as well. So there we're now expanding our impact into Malaysia too, and I'm trying to encourage them because here we have certain industries, but in Malaysia they have natural resources. Right, they have energy, and so if we can do working groups around that, then we can have further impact and scale even better. So thanks so much, Zita. Now over to you, Vivian. So Vivian is one of the coordinators for our investment funds group. So would love to hear your thoughts on how that's evolved and your role and plans there. Thanks.
Yeah, if I can just also. Yeah, maybe pick up on a couple of points to just round off, because I think that's really important maybe to help, the context. Because I think Naomi really put it very well in terms of how the provisions work, or what we're looking at in terms of green loans and in particular sustainability-linked financing. And she said that, the wish is that every corporates will have concrete sustainability targets that will be financed through such loans. So this actually touch on the corporate level sustainability framework. And then when we listen to Zita, that is actually very concrete in terms of the issues at the sector and operational level. So in Hong Kong, the key sectors that there is critical for transition, finance is big, real estate, logistics, and maritime, I think, just off the top of my head. So we're covering that comprehensively. And I guess for investment funds and capital markets, I look at them together in the sense of what I was saying earlier. These are relevant for supply of capital to sustainability. And so I'm also involved in the capital markets group, although I'm not a coordinator, so I'm kind of contributing. And there are parallels, especially when we develop playbook or toolkit. And so that's sort of the broader context. And for investment funds, we decided firstly within the group, what do we want to focus on? Because investment funds can be across public markets, private markets, in terms of investing in listed securities. That's what I mean by public markets, or infrastructure fund, which is not sort of a big focus in terms of the asset managers that are here in Hong Kong necessarily, but there is kind of a lot of opportunities there. But in some, whether it's infrastructure or real estate funds or private equity funds, that's like the private market funds. That's where it's not listed securities, but investing specifically on startups or small and medium-sized companies or real estate or infrastructure. So we sort of thought that we will focus there. The difference is that in public securities, you trade and then you don't really, we have this idea of stewardship, right? But you try and influence the listed companies, but you're just trading on the stock exchange. So there's so much, not so really so much you can do in terms of the contractual clauses at this level. But within the private markets, there's probably more areas that we can look at. And specifically, we then focus on the set of clauses from TCLP that is intended to build on some international standards. The other unique feature about investment funds is that there's actually a lot of funds and the clauses that we look at, the market standards, it's quite international. It's not so much, so we have like the ILPA, which is the International Limited Partners Association, and also within this responsible investment space, there's the Principles of Responsible Investment. So a lot of these standards are introduced internationally. So we decided, therefore, to develop or transpose or adapt, rather, the clauses that is for limited partnership agreements that can help managers in Hong Kong to think about clauses that they can build into their limited partnership agreement in agreeing with their limited partners who may want to make green investments, and that could form the basis for them subsequently to also build a due diligence framework. And I come to the point of due diligence because this is actually where we are at in the capital markets group, where we are building a toolkit as a due diligence that could help the market, banks, investors, stakeholders, go to corporates, and also to help corporates think about climate aspects. Actually, we actually built it to be aligned with ISSB, which is sort of focusing on transition and focusing on sort of what kind of governance, what kind of metrics and what kind of targets and what kind of impact climate would have, so that would start a conversation in terms of what kind of ESG, or rather climate-specific KPIs that might be relevant for building sustainable finance instrument on. So there's some parallel there for public as well as private markets. So this is like the toolkit that we're using now, which, if I can say in terms of the momentum and timing, because within the capital markets group, and, Brian, do add, but I just want to say that we have both within the funds group, these engagement that we'll have among not just the law firms that are involved, but also taking this to the industry associations, such as the PRI, in terms of getting their thoughts on that. So this is something that we will be rolling out. But the challenge there in reality is that a lot of investment managers are either very proactive or not. So the ones that are very proactive, mainly on the public market space, they probably don't see necessarily, with those who are not proactive, then they probably kind of, there's some engagement that we need to do in the market, yeah. But I think the capital market space is a lot more well established in the sense that we already have a lot of green bonds and sustainability bond issuance in the market, and it's timely in that, like in our last meeting, we actually have a conversation that, very recently the Hong Kong MA also highlighted that banks should conduct kind of proper due diligence when they are engaging in origination for issuance. And so we thought that is actually great. Our due diligence toolkit would be perfect for helping banks kind of look at this as an additional tool that they could use.
Great. Thanks so much, Vivian. So the co-chairs for our capital markets working group couldn't attend. So let me chime in and add a little bit more to what you've had mentioned as well. So we're lucky enough to have, when I met some of you yesterday at Cyberport, and they had the whole panel of all the stakeholders who worked on Hong Kong's landmark tokenized green bond. I joked afterwards, we had the HKMA, we had the technologist, we had the bank, and we had BIS. I said, you missed the lawyers are not there. So we're actually working with some of the lawyers that actually structured that. And there's a little bit of a funny-ish story to that. So this committee started as a green bond committee, but then we ended up also having senior lawyers from another large firm who actually covers derivatives and structured products. So she said, well, can't this be covered in this as well? So that's why it went from a green bonds to a green capital markets. So that's one element. The other element is we actually invite stakeholders, international organizations to this, and they seem to be very happy to be part of our discussions. So we've got representatives from ICMA there, we've got representatives from ISDA there. So we've tried, there is, I'm not going to name per se, but there is a organization which covers loans, but They have not joined us to date. But the whole point is that we are here, my 2 cents worth is we're not here to replace what other people are doing. Right, there are lots of great work that's being done by other international organizations which are much better funded. We're here to plug the gaps, right? And we're here to have the lawyers who actually are willing to roll up their sleeves and actually draft clauses to be additive in a non-deal basis. So you will have lawyers who traditionally act for the banks or the underwriters or the funds, together with lawyers that traditionally act for the issuers, the borrowers, right? And in a non-deal basis so that we can hopefully find clauses that will be helpful to grow the ecosystem. So especially with Asia Pacific, what you might often have is you might have lawyers, you might have first-time issuers in smaller countries around the region, or first-time banks who have never worked on this. Don't we want to encourage them to grow their ecosystems, because that's how we actually make a positive impact on net zero. I wanted to close off a little bit here and then open up to some questions, if there are any, about what recommendations you might have in relation to growing the ecosystem. So part of it is actually talking about, again, I gravitate to the phrase climate conscious lawyering, right? So to me, what I liked about that was it doesn't matter what practice you have, climate impacts you. Right, so for those of us in Hong Kong is very much finance related. Now there are products there, which is great. But you could be climate and ESG. I've personally kind of avoided the word ESG a little bit because it's a bit controversial in the US. So but it's less controversial here. So some people are quite happy with that phrase. But no matter what area of the law you practice, climate actually does impact you in your own way, and there are different ways that you can contribute. Maybe coming back through here, any thoughts on how to grow the ecosystem and recommendations there? Vivian, start with you.
Yeah, I've been trying to do ecosystem building for the past 5-6 years. I think we are at the point where we really need to go deep and concrete, and I think I sort of said earlier, we need lawyers involved to sort of pick it apart. And maybe I can sort of, you use the blue onion logo, which is very interesting. I was looking at that, it's very interesting. I don't know whether you pick up, because actually the 4 fintech providers, they cover different aspects of the market, because I look at the entire ecosystem, I look at different issues, including very deeply on carbon with industry colleague Agnes here on voluntary carbon credits and the legal nature of voluntary carbon credits. And we're just saying that very happy to say that Oil School actually adopted some of our recommendations in their paper. And so that's an example, but I actually spend a lot of time just going back to basics and thinking about it. And that's an example of how we really need more lawyers thinking about it deeply and contributing. And I'm often the few lawyers in the room for the past 5-6 years. That is starting to change in the past year or so. We need to accelerate that. Because clients need the support and the market needs the support. And there's, I hope that's not coming across negative, because there are actually a lot of opportunities. So yesterday is Hong Kong Green Week, right? So yesterday and today it's the Climate Business Forum organized by the Hong Kong MA and International Finance Corporation, so IFC, the World Bank. And some of the key takeaways, and I would say in terms of how Asia is different, because in Europe, they started to lead, but actually in the past couple of years, there's a lot of concern around greenwashing. So there's actually a little bit of sense of them scaling back. That's, again, a problem with law and regulations. Some of the regulations were not clear, so some of the greenwashing is, I would say, because there are some early movers, but subsequently, the scrutiny and all the regulatory requirements is such that, they end up maybe inadvertently seeming to greenwash. So that's another separate conversation. So that's Europe, and then US, as Brian said, that's like pushback. But Asia, we sort of don't have that, and there's actually policy drive to transition, whether you look at sort of, China having been leading, and actually Hong Kong has been putting very good sustainable finance infrastructure from the regulations that we hear about. And then ASEAN, there's actually a strong focus as well. The ASEAN Capital Markets Forum also has very specific focus on using finance for sustainable development and sustainable development goals. So all of these are because we need to act, right? And 2030 is not far away. So there's a lot of targets that, you know, whether it's foreign policy or companies they're setting to peak carbon in 2030, there's a lot of concrete action needed, such as those that Zita described. So how do we build? Yeah, let's get all hands on deck. It doesn't matter where you start. Start by understanding and get involved, and then I think learning by doing is the term, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but you have to start engaging and really kind of, drive change.
Thanks so much, Vivian. And Vivian's being very modest, so actually IPBA is here this week, and in fact you're organizing a panel, again with traditional lawyers actually raising this amongst other lawyers as well. So we're all doing our little bit to grow the ecosystem. Zita, love to hear your thoughts as well. Thank you.
I think, I'm really happy to know that there are a lot of lawyers who are willing to participate and contribute in this front. And so, like, in many aspects in construction, as I said, is very decentralized. So what we can do is pull everyone together and hold tight and bottoms up telling the government, okay, we can do it. This is a profitable and economical, sustainable way of going forward, and infrastructure construction is the basic foundation for a whole society, for Hong Kong. So, well, China is pushing for it. That's why all the China contractors are doing this, and that's why Hong Kong, you have good grounds to do something great as well. And in Hong Kong or Greater China, and this is the example that we can set. And that is why I think to grow this system or to grow this ecosystem in construction specifically, I think it's like pulling everyone's brain together and joining hands, as Vivian said, to make this happen. And I mean, green financing is very important for developers to get money and make build their construction buildings. So that's why I think you guys are first, and then we hopefully can benefit from that, and then we can grow.
Yeah, maybe I should clarify. My ecosystem building wasn't so much on the legal community. There's some of that, but actually it's also getting finance and investment managers and the community kind of also to that same level. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much to both of you. Now over to Naomi. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how and encouragement on what we can do to build the ecosystem better here. Thanks.
Brian, my suggestion to grow the ecosystem is actually to look at the students and the younger generation and the ones in the room that you've mentioned. We actually have research that shows us that law students care deeply about being climate conscious, and it actually affects their decisions about which law firm to join. So being climate conscious is actually already embedded in the value system and affects the decision-making of a lot of the younger generation, their jobs, their spending habits, the investments they make. And I think the difference maybe is that we come to some climate consciousness from very different angles. You may be very passionate about being net zero and climate change. Someone might be very passionate about transport. And I just saw that we have released our first hydrogen bus in Hong Kong, which is a great news to see. Or you might be really passionate about plastic use and waste. And I think the younger generation is very plugged into issues like that. And for the students in the room, I have a very short story to tell. The head of Asia of our law firm told us a story that when he was with his teenager, they were washing their hands, and the head of Asia reached over to get a paper towel to dry his hands. And his son said, "Wait, Dad, why are you wasting a paper towel?" And the head of Asia said, "Well, I have to dry my hands." And the son said, "You could at least split it in half and share it with me so that we waste as little paper as possible." And when he shared this story, it really hit home to me that the younger generation are watching us. They're judging us. They're looking at what we are doing to be climate conscious and the impact that we're having. So I think the way to grow the ecosystem is to look at the students and the younger generation in the room, and for you to continue to hold us accountable, because I'm noticing that more law firms in Hong Kong and in different regions are actually marketing more of their sustainability credentials in order to attract the top talent and convince you to join us. So if you're a law student, when you join the working world, I think you can be a leader in the climate conscious space. If you work for lawyers who are not as climate conscious, you can be the expert and you can tell them about it. If you're at a law firm or at a corporation which has a lot of climate conscious lawyers, you can join them, join their ESG initiatives. I think you are the next generation to bring the ESG and climate consciousness to the mainstream. So I think it's actually for the rest of us to catch up to where the younger generation is and be climate conscious people in our daily lives, Brian.
Naomi, I'm going to bring you to all my events in future, okay? And I promise you, I did not know what she was going to say, but it actually, I can't resist the segue now. I was going to mention this a bit after the formal close of this, but I've actually, so some of you would know when I first launched the initiative, I involved students, and it was all voluntary again like this. I said, look, which students are interested in actually helping out? It created some interesting dynamics because some firms who join only for pro bono hours say, well, hang on, but if students do it, then I don't get to clock in my pro bono hours. But again, so the people that are here are not doing it for pro bono hours per se, right? But there is an alignment with their passion, their personal passions, but also with respect to their personal missions and interests. So with that, maybe let me open the floor to a couple of my students who actually we're working together on actually launching a new initiative. So maybe Sam, Megan, or Henry, I don't know who's decided whom, but maybe you can come down to introduce the new initiative we wanted to launch here today. So put your hands together for some of my students here. Thank you.
Oh, yep, it works. Good evening, everyone. I'm Henry, and I have Megan and Sam with me. And we're brand students, and we're here today to introduce our new network called the Asia Pacific Climate Conscious Law Students and Young Lawyers Network. And as our name suggests, our mission is to build a community of climate conscious law students and young lawyers across the Asia Pacific region. And since last year, and as mentioned as part of the LITE Lab, we have collaborated with the Chancery Lane Project on climate contracting, and initially the focus was in Hong Kong, but we have since ventured into Singapore and even Malaysia. And as you can see from both the sharing of the panel, the project is ever growing, and we hope that this network can unite the younger legal community and younger generation to contribute to more impactful projects to promote climate conscious lawyering. So there's a QR code on the top right. Feel free to sign up if you are interested in contributing, and we believe this is the start to the contribution of the younger generation, i.e. us and everyone else in the room. Thank you.
So just to be clear, I think it's to welcome young law students, but actually of the students here, all three doing TCLL, right? So two of you, right? So they're actually very soon going into the workforce. So that's why we make sure it's young lawyers as well. But we also welcome those young at heart who want to be mentors for this next generation. So we welcome mentors because that is what we're trying to do here. So involve so Naomi, I swear she didn't know we're doing this. So I couldn't resist the segue there, right? So it is the next generation. So when Vivian and I were speaking at the Gale Summit in London last year, it was quite interesting. Some of us know that there is an initiative in the US where there are law students from some of the Ivy League schools saying, guess what? They created a scorecard of all the law firms to see how good you are and rated them in terms of who their clients are. And some of the largest law firms did not rate very well. And in London, some law students were very keen to do something similar. And I kind of joked with them. I said, yeah, but in the US, they're kind of like, they're Harvard, Stanford, and and the like. So you need to have that caliber. So where did you go to school? Oxford, yeah, I guess they will think about it, right? So now here we have Hong Kong U students. I think if the Hong Kong U students are willing to say, hey, we're really keen about this, and these are the students that end up joining the best and the brightest of the firms here, we can actually change both on the supply-demand side. So the students, as Naomi was mentioning, are really interested in this. They want to have their interests aligned with the firms that they're joining, and they want to know what work is going to be done. So I applaud the students for the initiative, and this is just the start of more that we are trying to do in terms of the ecosystem building. So thank you very much, Henry, Megan, and Sam. Thank you. So with that, can I open the floor up for, I know it's 8 o'clock. I thank you all so very much for staying here without dinner, right? So it's an awkward time. Any questions for the panel? That we do have one there, please.
Oh, testing. Okay, thank you. I'm Howard. I'm also working in ESG reporting software as well. So I'm really, I'm really thankful that there is something like Chancery Lane Loan and Link Bond because, they are really related to ESG reporting. But I'm originally from the energy engineering side, and so my question may be a little bit, it's related to performance-based contracting actually. So when around 10 years ago, when we were talking about performance-based contracting in the field of energy engineering, we are always talking about things like measurement verification with like all the payments or like payback at the end of the day dependent on the amount of energy you can save, quantified and measured. And so as if you are looking at the other things like carbon credit generation also, they are also dependent on, at the end of the day, the amount of carbon credit generated is dependent on like the amount of carbon emission you can reduce from the baseline models. So it's like, okay, it's really performance-based. But if you are looking at the performance-based like the Chancery Lane Loan and Chancery Lane Bond statements right now, if you look at use of proceeds, it's like, hey, you have set a target. In all, like for example, for green building construction, you have a target saying that, hey, you need to achieve like something like BEAM plus gold rating buildings. But if you can't achieve it, hey, where's the like consequence? I can never see that from all those documents. So I was like, am I missing something? Like if that's not the case, maybe, hey, maybe it's really greenwashing, something like. I don't want to promote, I don't want to encourage that, of course, but so has like I was thinking, is there something missing in the performance-based contracting? Or, hey, Howard, this is the development we have right now, you have to accept it.
Thank you so very much for the question, Howard. So maybe actually, if I may, I'm going to pass it on to you, Naomi, because we had a kind of very interesting discussion exactly about the point you mentioned. So maybe, Naomi, if you can take that one. Then Vivian can chime in.
Maybe I'll split that question into two, because you also mentioned projects, for example, that have very good, let's say there is a data center, and the way that the sponsor is going to develop the data center data, depending on where you're from, it has a very high carbon efficiency. So compared to the baseline of other data centers, it uses much less carbon, and it's also not, it doesn't generate as much heat. Rather than a sustainability linked loan, you could try to go for a green loan. So that the use of proceeds there is actually linked to a green certification of your data center being built to certain specifications that you are not as carbon intensive as other data centers. So it's not that there is a penalty, it's that your financing promotes better efficiency projects in the market and in the infrastructure market. For your second question of, let's say there is a generic company, it's not tied to a specific project, and they want to do a sustainability linked loan and they set targets. And I think the question you made was, if they don't reach the targets, what then? And we discussed this in the group, and in Europe, it is becoming more common that if you don't reach your targets, your margin may go up. So you actually pay a slightly higher financing cost. but we haven't seen that replicated in the Asia Pacific market as much, and there may be other there might be other consequences. But another consideration that's often discussed is we are sometimes in a catch-22 position. If a corporate sets a very ambitious climate conscious goal to be really sustainable, the chances of them not reaching it are going to be higher. If you have a corporate that sets a less ambitious target, they're more likely to hit it, but it's less ambitious, and it may not have as big an impact in terms of net zero. So I think it's having to balance this, because if we put too strict a consequence, if you don't hit your target, all the corporates are just going to say, well, we don't want to have such an ambitious target, which I don't think is the point. We want to promote a very balanced discussion on what kind of ambitions a corporate should have, what kind of pathway we should have to net zero. Does that sort of help bring some color to the discussion?
Yeah. I believe it does. Vivian, if you can chime in.
I think Naomi put it really well, and I think that in the market there's actually review of the practice around use of proceeds instruments and sustainability linked instruments. And so also when Naomi mentioned that in Europe there's that practice where you don't meet the targets, you pay more interest. There's also a little bit of criticism that why should financial institutions benefit when they don't meet the targets. So there's a bit controversy. So this is being reviewed at the market level. But as Brian said, we're trying to be additive, so we're watching those. I mean, this is where, as our international bodies, like, actually the standard setting body for use of proceeds instruments and sustainability instruments is the International Capital Markets Association. And so there are working groups which Anton is on, and I'm kind of representing the firm on that, which is looking at some of these. But I think what we have been looking at within our group, which is why I think picking up on what Naomi said earlier, right? Looking at the sustainability framework of the corporates, and this is where the market needs to be very concrete. So on the green bond side, there's a lot of efforts in regulations around taxonomies. That's like being tight on what do you mean by green. So taxonomies to guide that. And then on sustainability links, is actually now having to really more and more connected to transition, so that it's not like any KPIs would do, but why are we doing this, right? Is to address climate change and climate risk, and you have to transition. So this is also what's happening in the market in terms of guiding the context and use of these instruments.
I really appreciate the question, because we actually had quite a heated discussion, right, around this point, because, and I think that's part of the reason for the idea of the playbook. So we're not advocating one or another, but actually we're explaining what the clause alternatives are and what the pros and cons of each of them, and then let the market and individual parties kind of negotiate accordingly, because there are pros and cons for each of them, right? So my provocation was actually along your line at the time, which was, well, hang on, if you don't punish them, then it could be greenwashing, right? But so thank you very much for the question, Howard. And for declaration of interest, Howard, actually, I met up with him only yesterday, and it seems that his company actually worked, carbon markets actually had worked.
Carbon exchange.
Carbon exchange, yes.
Where I'm at right now.
Correct, and his company actually worked with LITE Lab, but I've never met face-to-face before until yesterday. Agnes, another question, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for telling me all the great work that you guys are doing, the great initiative and your working groups and the students who are going to lead this drive for law school students. So I think Howard's question is more about consequence. Yes. So in Asia, in Hong Kong, the sustainability-linked loans actually do have consequence in terms of higher interest rates. If they don't meet it, they meet it, they meet the KPIs, they have low interest rates. If they don't, there's already a clause set in that there will be X amount of basis points higher, like 25 or 30 basis points. So the first sustainability-linked loan that has that I paid attention to was in October 2021. Hysan Development had that sustainability-linked loan, and if you see the moral conflict of having the banks earning more interest if the corporate doesn't do good in KPI, sustainable KPI. So, but Housing Development had a good solution, and they already at the beginning designated a certain NGO. So if they had a penalty, the penalty goes to that NGO. So that was the first and very innovative that I paid attention to. And then I paid attention to another one that says that the company would have to, I forgot which company, the company will have to use that penalty to invest in renewable energy. So those would offset the moral conflict.
Thank you for sharing those. I think it highlights a point. There's actually a lot of innovation possibilities within instruments, and that's happening in the market right now, yeah, so.
We need to talk
That's
more,
good.
Agnes, because what we're trying to do is actually build these cases, because a lot of it is ingenuity, right? New ideas and what sometimes people call contractual technology, right? So if, especially if people are negotiating in real time, sometimes they're not as creative as they might otherwise be. So let's chat more, because I think that's what we want to do with the database and give people more ideas and creative ways to help solve these kind of often wicked problems. So thank you. Any other last questions? Because it's 8, oh, one last one here.
A very quick one. I want to ask, are there any pro forma climate courses other than the one that may be tailor-made or project-based? Is this my question? Thank you.
In what context? Climate clauses for what kind of instruments?
I mean, for example, construction industry or other industries that have high-level carbon emissions that maybe are voluntary or mandatory requirement to drop some climate courses in your transactions. But I do not know whether there are any pro forma courses that can take as a reference point. Thank you.
Great. So maybe we didn't explain it as well at the very beginning. So the Chancery Lane, actually, that's exactly what they do. There are 200 clauses on their website. So if you go there, you can look at those. And those are drafted by lawyers pro bono. But those are all drafted under English and Welsh law. So the question originally with the proposal reaching out to me was like, Brian, can you transpose that into Hong Kong law? In some ways, yeah, it's not that difficult, if you know what I mean. But that's not a really interesting exercise. What's the interesting exercise is actually understanding why they draft in that way. And by the way, if it was drafted 3 years ago, time has gone so quickly, market practices have changed, new regulations come out, so how do we update that? How do we localize that? So we have local organizations here and local initiatives and local practices too. So that's what we're trying to do here. So we'd love to, are you a lawyer?
Is it jurisdictional based? So, okay, thank you.
Right, so they have English law and you're more welcome than welcome. It's all available. What we're trying to do is create a set of exactly what you were asking for Hong Kong, under Hong Kong law, under Singapore law, under Malaysia law, right? So at least that's our initiative for those 3 jurisdictions. And happy to involve more lawyers in all of this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe some kind of courses that will be catered for the Asia-Pacific regions. Thank you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thanks for the question. That means because we weren't clear enough, we all assume, right, in this little bubble, we all know what Chancery Lane is. With that, I have to stop the evening. This has been wonderful. You've been great. One of the reasons for us doing this is also it's recorded so that we can share the good work here. If you can please put your hands together to thank our fantastic panelists here, including Naomi, who's got COVID and braving the cold and joining us here. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're going to take some group photos here with the panelists, then also with the students. So thanks so much, students, for your great initiative. We look forward to growing with you all as well. So thanks again.